Mr. President,
The senator from Arkansas, I know.
I ask permission that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you. This past weekend, I was with a group of heroes from the greatest generation. These men and women faced some of the biggest challenges our nation has seen. They put aside their own needs to make the country and the world a better place. These World War II veterans from Arkansas were flown in on an honor flight to see their memorial. They didn't have much to say to me personally about the shutdown. We talked about it, but talked more about the branch of the service that they were in, what they did during the war, and various things that happened to them during that period, and of course about Razorback football. We didn't have to spend and take time to visit a great deal about the shutdown for me to know their thoughts. Their presence alone was enough of a reminder that we need to solve this issue. As the shutdown drags on, it spills into the debt ceiling discussion. These are two major issues with very serious impacts if left unresolved. To everyone outside of the Beltway, it seems both sides are digging their heels in deeper, both sides are ratcheting up the rhetoric, and nothing is getting done. The American people are tired of this, dismissing the other side's offers without consideration, and trading barbs do not help out one bit. No one is being asked to abandon their principles. What needs to happen, however, is both sides must respect the will of the American people. We must find a way to do what the public demands, reopen the government, and getting our spending under control. The President and the Senate majority want to say that their health care law is an entirely separate issue from this debate. That's simply untrue. And it's not the way Americans see it. One major reason the American people are rejecting it is because of its budget-busting price tag. We have a budget that can't be strained any further. Our debt stands at nearly $17 trillion. $6 trillion of that has been added on President Obama's watch. You can't take on that much debt and pretend that it isn't a problem. Americans don't have the luxury of telling their credit card company to stop calling because they don't want to pay the debt that they've racked up. This mess could be avoided if we simply followed regular order here in Washington, but we haven't done that in 10 years. What I mean by that is during my time in the Senate, we have passed one individual appropriations bill prior to the end of the previous fiscal year. We didn't consider a single appropriations bill on the Senate floor last year. Let's return to regular order of passing an annual budget and the accompanying spending bills, not one large bill. And the good news is that both sides, many members on both sides, feel that we simply need to get that done. But that doesn't get us out of our current mess. We have got to get the government operating again, and we have got to make it such that we avoid the following. Impassioned debates around major decisions like raising the debt ceiling in the past have resulted in positive policy changes. In fact, half of the 53 times Congress has agreed to raise the debt ceiling since 1978, they have attached conditions to it. The Gramm-Rudman Act is a perfect example. We talk a lot about the need to cap spending in Washington. Gramm-Rudman actually did that, and it led to a balanced budget. Even the situation that we're currently in with the Budget Control Act was born out of this type of constraint. Now, some in the chamber still aren't happy with that, but the Budget Control Act is the first time in a long time that we've managed to curb the growth in Washington spending. Anyone who has ever bought a house or a car can tell you that it takes some time to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. There's lots of haggling involved. The owner says, here's what it costs. The consumer makes an offer in return. This brings a counteroffer, and so on. This continues until both parties reach an agreement where everyone is satisfied. But the key to this process is that both parties have to engage in the discussion. Everybody needs to come to the table It's simply not enough to say this is where I stand and I won't take any other options into consideration. I'm fairly certain you'll never buy a house with that approach. The good news is that it seems we're heading in a positive direction. I believe that there is movement towards a consensus. At the very least, both sides seem to be coming out of their respective quarters and discussing our options. We need everyone to come to the table to develop a way forward that puts us on the path to fiscal responsibility. These discussions serve as a starting point for how to rein in reckless spending so we can eliminate the blank check, the philosophy that has become so pervasive in this town. If we need inspiration to solve this problem, the men and the women I visited with at the World War II Memorial this past weekend are a perfect place to look. They have actually been named the greatest generation in part for their willingness to take on enormous challenges because it was the right thing to do. We have an enormous challenge in front of us now. Let's follow the inspiration of the greatest generation. Let's put our country before ourselves and solve this problem. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
And welcome back to the Washington Journal. In this last segment today, we're going to be talking about the impacts of the shutdown on national security efforts. This is a subject that National Security Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, talked about last week at a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Here's a bit of what he had to say then.
I will tell you as to impacts, I've been in the intelligence business for about 50 years. I've never seen anything like this. From my view, I think this, on top of the sequestration cuts that we're already taking, that this seriously damages our ability to protect the safety and security of this nation and its citizens. I would commend to you Senator Feinstein's superb statement yesterday on the floor, outlining her concerns with which I completely agree. This affects our ability, this is not just a beltway issue, this affects our global capability to support the military, to support diplomacy, and to support our policymakers. And the danger here, of course, that this will accumulate over time. The damage will be insidious. So each day that goes by, the jeopardy increases. This is a dreamland for Foreign Intelligence Service to recruit, particularly as our employees, already many of whom subject to furloughs driven by sequestration, are going to have, I believe, even greater financial challenges. So we're spending our time setting up counseling services for employees to help them manage their finances. So from my standpoint, this is extremely damaging, and it will increase so as this shutdown drags on.
And joining us at the desk now to talk about this subject is John Bellinger, a former legal advisor to the National Security Council, currently a partner at the law firm Arnold & Porter here in D.C. Mr. Bellinger, in the days since Director Clapper made those comments, both the intelligence community and the Pentagon have recalled many, if not most, of their furloughed staff. In light of that, do you believe the shutdown continues to pose a threat to national security?
John, I do. I was in the Situation Room on 9/11 and then spent the next 7.5 years of the Bush administration, first 3 in the White House and the next 4 at the State Department, working on counterterrorism issues. We were a country at war then, and we remain a country at war now. And this shutdown of the government poses a really very substantial risk to our national security. We have a number of employees of our intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA, the FBI, the Defense Department, the Department of Homeland Security, all important national security agencies who are still out of work. Some of them have been called back now. But even more important than that, the leaders of these departments, who undoubtedly the American people expect should be focusing on leading their agencies to prevent and detect terrorist threats, are actually spending a substantial part of each day managing the shutdown, figuring out which employees need to be furloughed, what the message is to their employees to keep up morale. The supervisors all up and down the chain are, instead of spending time on terrorism and intelligence, are trying to counsel their employees. Morale has plummeted. Some people are being told, oh, you're not important, we're letting you go. That's not good for morale. And then the employees themselves are not even getting paid, even the ones who remain on the job.
How much do we know about what isn't getting done? Here's an NPR story that talks about concerns about defending against cyber attacks, keeping an eye on ballistic missile launches around the world, possibly impacted by the shutdown, and simply analyzing some of the raw intelligence data for those who make the decisions.
Right. And obviously the President and the leaders of these agencies have to make do with the resources that they've got. They have kept some employees on as essential, and so that means that terrorism, the critical issues are being addressed, but other issues, longer-term issues, are not being covered, so there's a real substantial risk to our national security. I'm really quite surprised that the Tea Party Republicans who have shut down the government in this case are not focused on the overall threat to the government. Certainly if we were in the middle of World War II, no one would have shut down the government in the middle of World War II. And we either believe we're in a war or we don't believe we're in a war.
John Bellinger writes for Lawfare, a blog devoted to hard national security choices. It's lawfareblog.com. And one of your recent columns just before the shutdown was, "Has the Tea Party forgotten about 9/11?"
Well, that's right. This was a scarring experience, 9/11, for all of those of us who served in the Bush administration. We set up, of course, the Director of National Intelligence. We heard Director Clapper, who is now the Director of National Intelligence. We set up the Department of Homeland Security. President Bush pledged that he would do everything he could to keep the country safe. And I fear that the Tea Party, many of them who are new to government, really don't understand the threats that are posed, that are still out there. And personally, I believe that even if their constituents are concerned about health care, which they undoubtedly are, that it is up to these members of Congress to say, I understand that, but from my vantage point here in Washington, there are very substantial threats here to the United States right now. We can't shut down these important intelligence and law enforcement agencies and tie up the leadership of those departments at a time when we remain under serious terrorist threat.
And you say members in your column for Lawfare that members are falling down in their responsibility to educate their constituents about this issue. Is it members on both sides of the aisle?
I think, primarily I believe it is the Tea Party Republicans, because they are the ones who have insisted on keeping the government shut down, and that many of them have chastised the president in the past for not understanding that we are in a war. And yet here, being in a war with Al-Qaeda around the world, we are shutting down the government and posing really serious risks to the American people.
We're talking with John Bellinger. He's a former legal advisor to the National Security Council, served in the Bush administration from 2001 to 2005 in that role, and afterwards you went over to the State Department?
That's right.
What did you do there?
I went over with Secretary Rice. I spent all 8 years with Secretary Condoleezza Rice, 4 years at the White House, and then I managed her confirmation process and became the legal advisor, the general counsel of the State Department. And of course, for 8 years after 9/11, many of the legal issues that were facing us, both at the White House and at the State Department, were issues relating to terrorism.
If you want to talk to John Bellinger about this issue, our phone lines are open. The numbers are on the screen there. We'll go first to Kelly from Rome, Georgia, on our line for Republicans. Kelly, good morning to you.
Yes, sir. I have a question. What I would like to understand is, does the furloughs and everything, the national security that I saw at the memorial, at the monument, I understand that they are furloughed. I've heard that all the furloughed workers are going to be getting back pay, and then I also understand that they're also could possibly be getting unemployment. I am very concerned about our national security. I would hope that this administration would keep the essential workers. And then I had one other question. I can't remember, I'm a little bit younger, but has this administration, I can't remember during the Clinton administration, but did Clinton do barricades and everything on a lot of different monuments and everything? And I would hope that as far as national security goes, the Obama administration would keep essential workers for national security, the NSA, the DOD, and everything, would keep everything in place to keep us up and running for terrorism, our vets and everything. Well, we kind of already know what they're doing as far as some of our vets are concerned.
Well, Kelly, on your unemployment and back pay question, we actually had the head of the lead federal employees union on the show on Saturday. He addressed this issue. The bill that's moving through Congress on that issue, addressing back pay, would mean that if federal employees got unemployment during their furlough and then were given back pay, they'd have to actually pay back their unemployment. But I'll let John Bellinger pick up on the national security side.
Great. And Kelly, it's a good question. It still has not yet been worked out whether people will receive back pay. It seems likely that that will happen. But right now it appears that even if employees who work or who were furloughed receive back pay later, their paychecks will be late, that they may be weeks late. So probably the next paycheck that even the essential personnel at the FBI, at CIA, at NSA, people who are working, that their next paycheck will be reduced. And government workers, like many people across the United States, are living paycheck to paycheck. So for them, even if they are an essential employee at an intelligence agency working on a counterterrorism issue, to get half a paycheck, hope that they will maybe later on get paid, not be able to make a mortgage payment or a car payment, and at the same time be told you're essential and you have to be focusing on counterterrorism issues. It's really terrible for morale. The heads of the agencies, Secretaries of Defense, the heads of the CIA, the heads of the Department of Homeland Security, these agency heads who we want to be focused on our security threats are in fact spending a good chunk of every day having to work on pay issues, shutdown issues, deciding who's essential, who's not, reassuring those people that they will get paid, or if they are considered non-essential, that they are still valued employees. So it's causing terrible morale problems. With respect to your point about do we have the essential people on board, those are, again, the major decisions that the agency heads have to sit and spend hours every day shifting priorities around. So we are certainly, as I understand it now as an outsider, agency heads are shifting people to the highest priorities of the day, but that means that longer-term analyses are going undone.
And as to the furlough status of folks who work in the national security sector of the federal government, on Saturday, Secretary of Defense Hagel recalled most, if not all, of the about 350,000 employees that had been on furlough for the Pentagon. The CIA Director John Brennan recalled a lot of his staffers this week. There's a story in the Washington Post there about that. In that story, it notes that U.S. officials said that other intelligence agencies besides the CIA were taking similar steps, but they, of course, declined to disclose specifics on how many and which categories of employees would be summoned back to their jobs. Sean Turner, a spokesman for Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, said Clapper had authorized the recall of some employees at the National Counterterrorism Center, the National Counterproliferation Center, the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive, and the National Intelligence Council. That from the Washington Post earlier this week. We're talking with
Ask unanimous consent the call of quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, with your permission, I'd ask the clerk to report the cloture motion that I have filed.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close debate on the motion to proceed to S. 1569, a bill to ensure the complete and timely payment of the obligation of the United States government until December 31st, 2014, signed by 17 senators as follows: Reed of Nevada, Baucus, Murray, Schumer, Durbin, Mikulski, Whitehouse, Udall of Colorado, Nelson, Boxer, Tester, Schatz, Cardin, Gillibrand, Cantwell, Kane, and Warren.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that we now proceed to pre-morning business centers allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 199.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 199, S 1276, a bill to increase oversight of the revolving fund of the Office of Personnel Management and so forth.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure?
I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent the committee report and substitute amendment be agreed to. The bill as amended be read a third time passed. The Carper title amendment, which is to be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to H. Conrad's 58.
The clerk will report.
H. Conrad 58, expressing the sense of Congress regarding the need for the continued availability of religious services to members of the armed forces and their families during a lapse in appropriations.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the 11th amendment to the concurrent resolution which the desk be agreed to. The concurrent resolution as amended be agreed to. That 11th amendment to the preamble which the desk be agreed to. The preamble as amended be agreed to. And the motions to reconsider be laid on the table.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 10:30 a.m. Friday, October 13th. Following the prayer and the pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired. Turn the proceedings to be approved to date, and the time for 2 leaders be reserved for use later in the day. And that following any leader remarks, Senate recess subject to call of the chair to allow for a Republican special caucus with the President of the United States.
Without objection.
You know, as further business come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned till 10:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
So the Senate's gavelled out, but earlier today, Senate Democrats attended a meeting at the White House to discuss the government shutdown and the debt ceiling. Members spent the rest of the day coming to the floor to talk about the two issues, with more expected tomorrow. Today in the House, lawmakers passed a bill funding border security through December 15th. Follow the House live on C-SPAN and the Senate live here on C-SPAN 2. But right now,